Good morning. My name is Nikki Leonard, and while I'm not technically a member of this church, I have a really warm feeling for this church in my heart. My wife, Carol Garrison, is very active in the church, and in fact, she and I were married here, and it's a remarkably good time. My miracle story, that time when I felt especially close to God, there have been a number of them, but the one that I am particularly fond of is this. I'm a member of a group in recovery that requires that a person have a close personal relationship with a power greater than themselves. And when I first got into this recovery group, I wanted nothing to do with Christianity. I was fed up with this patriarchal Judeo-Christian God. I'm lesbian and I'm transgender, and there's been a lot of harm done to my communities by so-called Christians. And so I found other sources of connection with a power greater than myself, and it worked. But I kept searching. I kept searching for new ways to get closer to this source, to the Creator. And as I was driving out of the mountains this one day from work, I was listening to Joseph Campbell, and he said this interesting thing. He was talking about the Gospel of Thomas, which was one of the Gospels that wasn't included in the Bible. And he read a bit from the Gospel of Thomas and said, now that's Buddhism. That's Buddhism. And that fascinated me because I've always suspected that there are these underlying connections between the different faiths that aren't obvious. And so I started reading about the Gospel of Thomas and the other Gnostic Gospels. And it was very interesting. I still had no interest in becoming a Christian, but indirectly I was learning more about Christianity. But along the way, all of these little coincidences started happening. Christian coincidences, if you would. I might be listening to something and find out that this songwriter who I really liked was a Christian, or perhaps an author that I really respected was a Christian. I didn't put it together quite right away, but when it really all came to a boil was I was in Rediscovered Books downtown, and there was a copy of Traveling Mercies by Anne Lamott. Now, I had read Anne Lamott's book on writing. It's called Bird by Bird, and it's a wonderful book, but I hadn't read any of her other works because I knew she was a Christian, and I just didn't want anything to do with Christianity. But when I looked at this book, Traveling Mercies, it was like it was shimmering. It was like I was looking at it through the waves that you see on a highway in the desert during summer. I looked away, and I looked back again, and it was still shimmering. So I bought the book. And I went home and I read it. And so much of her story was like my story. She was so broken. She was so miserable. And she had started going to this church just to listen to the music. But she would leave as soon as they started into the liturgy or anything. And then she became aware of this presence following her around. And she knew the presence was Jesus, and she wanted nothing to do with this presence. But then this one time she left church, and this presence was following her, and she went back, and she got in the room where she was staying, and she was on the floor in the corner, and she felt this presence there in the room with her, and she stopped and she said, okay, I give up, you can come in. And she opened her heart just a little, and Jesus entered into her heart. And I felt the same. I sat there and read this, and I opened my heart just a little, and Jesus entered my heart. I didn't quite know what to do with that. I started going to services at the church that I am a member of, Boise First United Church of Christ. It's a very, very progressive congregation, which of course I needed. But when it really struck home for me was probably the first 10 or 12 times I was in services, I just cried. I had so completely come home. I had so completely come home to being a member in the body of Christ. And that's my story. Thank you.